The Inspector General of Police, Muhammad Adamu, has ordered all Assistant Inspectors General of Police and Commissioners to carry out full enforcement of the Coronavirus Disease Health Protection Regulations 2021, signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari. In a press statement released by the Force Public Relations Officer, Frank Mba, the IGP gave the order of the strategic police managers to ensure full enforcement of the regulations in public places, as well as the use of face masks. The IGP called on citizens to voluntarily comply with the provisions of the regulations for the safety of all. He also cautioned officers to be professional, polite, and respect the fundamental rights of the citizens while enforcing the law. All of these efforts are geared towards reducing community transmission of COVID-19 and upholding citizens to a higher standard of responsibility in ensuring that the pandemic is brought under control, even as the search for local remedies continue. So joining me in the studio now is my colleague, Veronica Danikboy. Veronica, good morning.
Mike, good morning. It's
nice
good
to
to be
see you.
on this
Oh,
side.
yeah. Oh, yeah. It's all right. Now, let's talk about this. Now, it's going to be an offense for anyone not to use
6 months jail term.
Exactly. For anyone not to use face mask in public places now.
Absolutely.
Now, when it comes to that enforcement, a lot of people have said that this law should have been in place long before now. What do you make?
Mike, I think I want to agree with that, but having the law in place is not the problem. You know how it is with us in Nigeria. We always have a plethora of laws, but enforcement has also been a challenge. You recall during the first phase when there was a law in place, no movement, interstate movement, there was a ban. We saw what happened. Sharp practices, people still traveling, you call a friend.
People were bribing police officers to get across states.
Issue. These sharp practices, can we check them to ensure that these laws put in place are effective? That is the effectiveness of any law is what matters. Because right now it is important that people begin to own their safety, and that is what we are after. So how do we check all of these sharp practices, bridge the gaps that will ensure that, put system in place that will ensure that this system, you know, will not give room for those practices. Enforcement is the major issue.
Because the abuse of the implementation either makes it ineffective
or effective.
Or high-handedness is found somewhere, which leads to people brutalization and harassment, sometimes unnecessarily, and even extortion, like they say.
Of course.
All right. We have joining us now Professor Ade Ojeni, Denmark-based chief physician and professor of human and veterinary medicine. Professor Ojeni, it's good to have you join us this morning. Nice to see you, and Happy New Year, let me say.
It seems happy New Year than 2020.
Great. Now, Nigeria is stepping up all efforts to ensure that they contain and curtail the spread of coronavirus. Now, the president is making it a law that if you're in a public place and you're not wearing the mask, it's going to be an offense against the state, and you could be jailed for 6 months, as the case may be, and also there could be fines as well. Now, I was asking my colleague here, because we've heard comments from a lot of people that this should have been in place long before now. What do you make of this new law?
Thank you very much indeed. And thanks to the last speaker, your colleague. The law sounds great. It's just a little bit late. I wouldn't say too late. It's appropriate. But the question is, how many, then we have to build many jails, because there will be, to make room for millions who will be put in that jail. Because how do you implement this law? The problem of our country had always been the implementation of any laws, any regulations, any rules, any edicts. All these things are just on paper. Do they work? The big, short answer is no, they don't work.
Now,
I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, but Professor, you were home during the Yuletide, and you at least you moved from, you saw how things were back home here in the country. From
yes,
your perspective, from your perspective, why do you think people are not adhering to this, even when the information is out there as to the dangers of COVID-19?
Yeah. The usual thing is people know the difference between right and wrong, but there are many factors that mitigate against implementation of these things. Number one, people know that whatever happens, they will get away with any infringement that they commit, any crime they commit. It's like people are so immune to these things because they know, oh, nothing will happen. We can always go around it. We can either bribe our way or threaten our way through. And so, and if the facilities are not there and the law enforcement does not function, then everything is just a shame. I'm sorry.
All right, Prof, I'll come back to you, Veronica. The point we have discussed on this show so many times when it comes to how the law is implemented on one hand, the capacity of law enforcement to implement the law, and when it comes to the professionalism of the Nigerian police, for instance, or law enforcement agencies, that has never really been in doubt.
Right.
But when it comes to, go to the field and enforce, sometimes something goes wrong somewhere. What do you think should be put in place now in order to ensure that people don't get harassed, people don't get brutalized, people get respected? Even if I'm going to arrest you, I should still respect because you have a right.
Right.
How should they balance that?
Engagement between
exactly.
the force and the people. You recall that this issue of trust, the trust deficit between the people and the police force has always been on the front burner, which was what led to what we saw happen in October, the hashtag EndSARS protest and all of that. And they have been working on trying to build on that. If you see the level of relationship between the police and the people now, they are seemingly courteous, if I may use the word, being careful, relating with people. So I think they should extend that and perhaps use that opportunity to educate people as well, because then people begin to know that they have to take responsibility for themselves. It's not just because I need to come out to do my job. I am actually looking out for you. That is why I am here to express and explain to you that this is what government is saying, and we need to do this.
So policing should be seen as a service to people.
Right. Yeah, right.
Okay. All right, Professor, let me come to you on the issue of testing. The Presidential Task Force is making arrangement to test about 450 people across local governments in the country. One would say that is going to be humongous. That is really tasking, but it's a good development and good when it comes to spreading the tests across the country. But when it comes to that uniformity, what a lot of analysts are saying that the disease or the virus is endemic in some places than others. And they are looking at the possibility of concentrating in states that have more of these cases than states that don't have much at all. But what do you make of this? Because this is really a hard decision to take. But what do you make of that?
Well, I think the question of testing should be left to the experts, the epidemiologists, the immunologists, the doctors, the nurses, the auxiliary health personnel who are to be involved in it. I think it should be left to the medical personnel, not to administrators. Then they will be able to tell you precisely what to do, how to do it, what extent is to be done, and the different strata at the age groups and so on and so forth, and the locations. These are things for experts to take a decision on, not a political decision at all.
But
they could give an overall view of what they want to achieve, but the implementation, the distribution, the enforcement, and the execution of those tests should be left to the experts.
Well, of course, we expect that the experts will be the ones to conduct all of that, but they certainly need the political will to ensure that things are distributed and logistics are arranged. But when it comes to available laboratories that have what it takes to conduct those tests across the states and among the 774 local government areas of the country, I wonder what you make of that. You've been home and you know the capacity that we have when it comes to health infrastructure.
Yeah, and this is where the experts are to be consulted. Then they can establish mobile units. If you want to say, okay, you want to take tests and you don't have a laboratory nearby, that is where mobile units are of essence here and now.
All right, Veronica,
solve that problem.
Okay, all right, Professor, I'll come back to you. Now, Veronica, the issue of communication is very key here. And a lot of people, as at now, more than 1 year after coronavirus came to the news, a lot of people still say that coronavirus is a scam. Right. You still hear that from, and you'd be like, after all the numbers of people who are dying and people who are falling ill and all of that, even plus with the ones we know, the ones we don't know, people still say it's a scam, you know. But what do you make of that effective communication that will sink down to people's minds? Because some people say there is too much information out there, so there's information fatigue on one hand, right, but then the others are not getting it rightly. What do you make of that?
Still boils down to one, being there is a trust issue. Okay. What the government is saying and what the people are thinking, that gap has to be bridged. How much have we done when it comes to advocacy? Telling people these are the issues on the ground, risk communication. How are we engaging our community communicators who these people trust, seemingly, to spread the word? Are we getting across to them? Talk about religious leaders, talk about celebrities.
Traditional rulers.
Traditional rulers, all of them. How are we making best use of these people to reach everyone? I recall speaking with a friend over the weekend, and she told me that in her community, people do not use face masks. This is still in Lagos. Nobody uses face masks. And when they see her using it, they make jest of her, saying, what is wrong with you? There's nothing going on. So why are you using
I guess the police has to visit that community.
So these are the things. Now, for those who are even making an attempt, they are being discouraged by these same people, which is also complicating the whole process. So how are we going to, you know, de-emphasize this message so that everyone understands the risk involved? And the trust gap is bridged, which is very key if we need to move forward. Now, people can bring themselves to say, okay, I want to go for the tests. Yeah. And every other thing, the chain is built, and we can see how to address it moving forward. All
right. Now, Professor Ojeni, the issue of vaccine, there is still search for local remedies, as we understand. The government is looking for local remedies. And at this time, a lot of people have commended the government in that regard as to looking for a local remedy is a good thing. Also expecting the ones from across the world for Nigerians to be tested and vaccinated is another thing. But when it comes to the one that will be imported into the country, a lot of people have concerns regarding the capacity of storage and all of that. And they have talked about the fact that some of in fact, the very good percentage of the vaccines expected in the country due to storage challenges might lose their efficacy. What concerns do you have in that?
I have a lot of concerns, and that's why I think it's wonderful that the government is turning its attention to local medications, but then just get the Nigerian Medical Association to be heavily involved in it, because they are the ones that can give the guidelines. They're the ones that can assess in cooperation with the producers of these local things. Because I mean nobody has a patent on solutions to every medical problem, and so all the efforts that can be put in should be put in, but involve those who have knowledge of these things. And that's why I say that the Nigerian Medical Association, the the Veterinary Medical Association as well, and of course, all our local people who have knowledge of medicine, our local medicines, let them be involved. It's a joint effort, and by goodness grace, we will get through this pandemic.
All right, Professor, share with us, you are in Denmark, share with us how the government, and especially the government at the grassroots level, the ones closer to the people, how are they approaching the issue of engaging the people and ensuring people are being tested and keeping the enforcement? How are they doing that in Denmark?
Well, you have the central government that dishes out these directives, and everybody is aware of what to do, and you don't have the efficacy of any chain depends on each link in the chain. Once you have a weak link, that defines the strength of the entire chain. You see, everybody here is aware of what to do, and they are implemented according to the directives that are given by the central government, by the Ministry of Health, by the health authorities, and especially by the health frontline workers. So everything functions as it should here. And at the local level, those who are to do things, they do the things. The facilities are there as well. And there is dissemination of information, and there are efficient measures put in place by everybody involved in the entire chain of events. That's why things function.
All right. Now, if we compare the two, between Denmark and Nigeria, for instance, what more do you think we have to do to ensure that we turn the tide around?
Well, to turn the tide around, you would need dissemination of information and awareness that whatever you do has an effect on your neighbor. Not just your neighbor who is living next door, but your fellow citizens. Let's put it that way. And the facilities have to be there too. And implementation, again, as your fine colleague said, she said earlier that the problem is implementation. And how do you implement these things? How do you enforce these things? Those are the real great challenges. If the facilities are not there, if the implementation is not done according to the protocol, then everything is just a sham.
All right, Professor Adeojeni, thank you so much for joining us on the program this morning.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Right. And I still have my colleague Veronica in the studio. Now, Veronica, when it comes to leaders, collaboration between leaders, we see that the Presidential Task Force declared Kogi State a high-risk state, and that is because of the body language, seeming body language of the governor of Kogi State, for instance. Now, all of these leaders have access to information, privileged information that people don't have access to.
Absolutely.
So when they act and when they make a statement, they talk from perspective of deep understanding. So, but when the outcome is at cross purposes where they don't seem to agree on what impact do you think this will have on the people down there?
Well, it's the same as what we have said, or what we have been saying. If the government on the one hand is saying one thing and a state governor is saying another thing, it has its impact on the people who believe that as the chief security officer of a state, you have their interest at heart. That is what they believe because they voted you in and they trusted you. And if you are saying this is not what is happening, what the government is saying is different from what is happening in my state, they wouldn't take whatever the government is saying seriously. And that's a huge challenge. There has to be some synergy between the federal government, the state government, and even the local government, which is closer to the people. Like the professor said, that chain is there. And so it has to be, you know, if it is, the communication is followed and that chain is strengthened, we'll get the right results. All
right, Veronica Danikboy, thank you very much for coming on my show. On your show. Nice to see you, really.
Thank you.
Okay.